This is Spiritual Mamas Podcast. We're a couple of mamas out here just trying to raise kids, make it through a workday, and navigate mental health, all while going through a spiritual awakening. And we thought we'd take you with us. So grab your favorite cozy drink and let's chat. Hello,
Hi, welcome.
I'm Aericka,
And I'm Kim.
and this is Spiritual Mamas Podcast. Welcome back.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
So, how are things?
Things are great. Things are wonderful, beautiful, amazing.
That's good.
So great. We woke up and it was 6 degrees out today, which is like my least favorite thing. But this morning I was very intentional about what I wanted to focus on and what I wanted to bring in today. And that had a lot more to do with gratitude, with love, with, just a really positive outlook today. So
Awesome.
That's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you, can I say it's your birthday?
Yes, at the time of recording.
It is Kim's birthday. Yay!
Today's my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well, that's good. I'm glad the day started out good for you. It's a good start to your birthday. We're recording, which I think is always fun. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be a good day.
Yeah, I went and did I told you earlier, I went and did my workout this morning, and the personal trainer, who's my sister-in-law, was like, what a way to start your day. I mean, I guess, yeah, do something good for you. And I'm like, well, I have to work later, and that is something that I would rather not do on my birthday, so let me start the day with something that's good for me that I would want to do.
Exactly.
So, exercise, podcast, then work.
Awesome. I like it.
How you doing today?
Well, I did not start my day with any sort of intention. Mm-hmm. Per usual, I woke up late, and per usual, jumped on late, and so I'm here. But other than that, I'm doing fine. Doing great.
Mornings are not your thing.
No. I am literally a middle of the day person. Don't get me late, don't get me morning, literally middle of the day.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
you thrive.
I'm useless otherwise.
Well, you're making it for the recordings because we do them in the morning generally.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Too early, I'm not good, but this time's okay. So.
Okay.
All right, you ready to just kind of get into it?
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about asking for and receiving messages from spirit. I wanted to throw out there real quick that we're going to talk about very specific things today, synchronicities and cards. There's a million other ways to ask for and receive messages from spirit. We're not going to get into all those today, but there is a number of ways that you could.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a specific intuitive worker, I guess is what you want to call it, you're gonna have different ways, but this is in general, the general public.
Yeah. And I like the idea of starting with synchronicities because it's something that's seemingly easy. It's not something that you necessarily have to put a lot of energy into. You do have to be paying attention, and you can be specific about it, but it's not something that you have to take a course in or learn something about. So
yeah, and honestly, I had not really ever heard that word synchronicities until getting into the intuitive stuff. So I had to really was like, what does that mean? I know it's being synchronous means, but what is a synchronicity? So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll start there. Anyway, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a synchronicity is the coincidental occurrence of events, and especially psychic events, such as similar thoughts in widely separated persons or a mental image of an unexpected event before it happens, that seems related but are not explained by conventional mechanisms of causality. And this was used especially by Carl Jung, which we talked about at this point. I don't know when the episode was, but we recently talked about Carl Jung. But there's this big idea that there is no such thing as a coincidence. There are
Right.
people who very much believe there's no such thing as a coincidence. If something is happening, it's happening for some sort of reason, good, bad, or indifferent. And so synchronicities is a way of paying attention to what's happening and finding any patterns around that.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
Yeah. I do too.
Yes.
90% of the time, yeah.
Yeah. I don't necessarily believe there's this, sometimes people say, oh, well, if it's happening for a reason, or God made that happen for you for a reason. And that idea, especially when put on top of like something that's tragic, is not really helpful. And I don't necessarily believe that like, oh, something terrible is happening to people for a reason. Like you have to find the silver lining or find the, the reason for it. But I do believe that, I do believe that we don't really have coincidences, that things happen and there may be some sort of pattern around it. Whether or not it was meant to be is a different story, in my opinion, because I do think that you can manifest things, you can make things happen based on what you're putting out there, knowingly or unknowingly.
Right.
So
I personally do believe that everything happens for a reason. Not silver lining wise, like not as like, oh, I'm going to find something good about this,
yeah.
but I think that it like shapes who you are. So everything happens maybe down the road you'll need this, or like it's shaping your personality, good, bad, or indifferent, and I think there's a reason for it. Will you ever know the reason? Maybe not. Maybe it won't be apparent. Maybe it'll be so many years later. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I personally believe that.
Yeah.
But I don't use it as a, oh, well, find the silver lining in this horrible event. It's just kind of like, I just believe it's just happening and we'll find out later why. But
yes. Yeah, I agree. And I think to put that in like the simplest way, I think of something as small as like, well, I'm going to use small in air quotes because for some people this is like their entire lives. But like if you're a clumsy person and you tend to get into a lot of accidents and it's like, oh, this is happening again, or why is this always happening to me? And it's not, in my thought process, it's not necessarily that there's like a reason that this is happening to you, that you have to like learn some major life lesson or transform. Right. But maybe if you're paying a little bit more attention, or maybe if you're, being a little bit more intentional, or if you're thinking about things through a certain lens, then you may be able to avoid some of those, clumsy accidents that might happen or something like that.
Yeah.
If I were to put it in my own life, I, knock on wood, used to get in a lot of car accidents. I've been in like, I don't know, 5 or 6 car accidents. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and of all the car accidents I've been in, so let's say that it was 5, 4 of them were not my fault and 1 was. And it's like, well, why do I continuously get into these accidents when I know people who've been driving for 20, 30, 40 years and have never been in a car accident?
Yeah.
Or, and for me, although it's not like, oh, this is meant to teach you something, there is that, okay, I can see the chain of events. I could see what led to what led to what
right.
to get me here. So
makes sense.
Yeah. But as far as synchronicities themselves are concerned, we often see this correlation between like history and how we can identify patterns in history. We see that in math, in evolution, in nature. We can identify all of these patterns that pop up. And when you're in tune with that or attuned to that, it's easier to see the synchronicities that are happening in your life.
Yeah.
So, some examples of synchronicities might be something like, and probably the most common that people hear about would be like repeating numbers, angel numbers, repeating letters. I see 1212. I see, for me, okay, so today we're recording this on my birthday. My birthday is 121. I see 121 all the time. 121, 121, 121, like everywhere.
Interesting.
And I always notice it. I always pick up on it when I see it. because it means something to me.
Yeah.
So, or something like angel numbers. I'm not that familiar with
Mm-hmm.
that and, what they correspond to, but certain angel numbers, 333, 555, 888,
Yeah,
whatever.
111.
Yeah, 111 means something. They have specific messages tied to them. And so if you're seeing them repeatedly, that could be a sign of a synchronicity, a message that spirit is trying to send you.
Mm-hmm. I've never really seen the numbers thing myself that I can
Mm-hmm.
recall.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you would call like waking up. No, I used to wake up at the same time
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are sometimes like people will see them all the time, everywhere, and other times that they don't. And like I said, for me, I see 121 everywhere. I don't believe that that's an angel number, I don't think. Um, but I see that because it means something to me. As far as like angel numbers are concerned, I don't really see them often. If I see it once, like I happen to look at the clock and it's 333,
Mm-hmm.
it's one time.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a synchronicity. That's just me happening to look at the clock at that time.
Yeah. I think it depends. Like if you had asked for something, like
Mm-hmm.
a sign, and then that happened.
Yeah.
But I feel like it has to happen more than once.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe just my skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, that's the point of the synchronicity is that it's a repeat. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that you're noticing, a pattern that you're noticing. So if
Mm-hmm.
you notice it once, it could be like, okay, you're noticing that and that may mean something, but it's not necessarily like a message that you have to receive
Mm-hmm.
versus if you're repeatedly seeing it, it's like, okay, pay attention and what is this telling you?
Yeah.
Uh, One of the articles that I was looking at as I was looking up things about synchronicities was mentioning this person's experience, the author's experience with synchronicities. And what they chose to do was use license plates
Mm-hmm.
to try and find messages. They asked for messages and were trying to find
Mm-hmm.
them. And they decided to do that through license plates. So they were being specific on how they were receiving the message. And the reason they chose license plates is because that person was spending so much time like driving. So there's lots of license plates. So
Mm-hmm.
there's what he called a high refresh rate.
Okay, makes sense.
It's not an accident that you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing this because you're seeing so many that
Right.
uh
And they're so random. Like they don't
yes.
go together. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a way of looking for some of these synchronicities.
Did he
Um,
find any?
yeah, he was in the article, and
Mm-hmm.
I shared a link for it, so it'll be in the description. But he mentioned that like at one point he was at a stoplight, and every single car around him had 74 or 47 in the license plate, and
Nice.
that's like so strange. How do you
Yeah.
get to every car that you see stop at
Yeah.
this stoplight has that same number?
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
very. And then some other ways that you might find might be like odd visuals, animals, colors, shapes, objects, sounds. Um, Something like seeing elephants repeatedly, or something like hearing bells, or the lyrics to your favorite song, or your favorite song playing, in unconventional places.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I've had the animal one a number
yeah.
of times. Yeah. I when I had a beetle. There was in a oh my gosh. The coffee hasn't kicked in. In a Reiki session, I
Mhm.
was handed a beetle by
Yes.
somebody, and a giant, like, big black beetle.
Hmm.
And I was told, this is yours now. And I was like, okay, interesting. And then after, I saw big black beetles so many times, like walking across my path, like in my house, like just random things. I was talking to my mom about the incident. A big black beetle walks past me
Hmm.
outside. It was like the I was like, okay, I get it. Thank you. So as soon
Yeah.
as something about this black beetle. And then I looked it up and found out what beetles meant. So it was interesting.
And then you
So
realized whatever message you were trying to
exactly.
receive there. Were you asking for a sign at that point?
I can't remember. Well, I think I had gone there for healing, or I wanted. something. Like I think I was there to like kind of like get rid of negative energy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was handed the beetle, and apparently beetles are like for transformation and
Mm-hmm.
change and not what I thought it was. I thought it was like something scary. I was like, "Oh, this is a bad omen."
Yeah.
But no, they're actually really good. It's like transformation and change and new beginnings, I think is what it is.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you were getting what you were asking for.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
That's really interesting that it was like made clear in that way.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think one of the things with synchronicities is that people, if you're looking for them, can find them anywhere.
Mhm.
And so that's the thing that you want to be cautious of is,
Mhm.
is this a synchronicity or is this a natural life event?
Mhm.
And what I specifically think of when I think of that is something like fruit flies or gnats.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard it said before that if you find fruit flies or gnats like surrounding you or bothering you all the time, that it's negative energy that you're like holding on to or attracting. Um, and I've heard that said before. I'm just going to leave that there.
Hmm.
However, you want to be cautious with something like that because for me in particular, I have lots of plants and my plants often have gnats on them.
I'm thinking, I'm like, well, maybe my fruit's spoiled in the corner. Like,
Yeah, yeah. If it's the middle of the summer and I have fruit on the counter and it's been
mhm.
sitting there, then
Mhm.
yeah, of course it's going to have like ants crawling all over it or something like that. Like, so
Yeah.
you just want to be aware of, is this meant to be here? Is this like a natural life event cycle or something like that? Or is this out of place?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say that. I mean, because you could literally find a
Mm-hmm.
synchronicity in anything, a pattern in anything, a sign in anything if you're wanting it bad enough.
Yeah.
I feel like it's when it's odd for you
Mm-hmm.
and then happens again in like short succession. Like I said with the beetle, like I don't think I've seen that many beetles in that particular beetle in my area that many times.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that like when we're talking about this idea that things aren't coincidental and things aren't random, they happen for a reason. You could find a synchronicity in anything, anywhere, anytime. So the meaning that you're ascribing to it and what you're looking for has a big play on it, but you just want to be mindful of if that makes sense for this situation.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you're getting into this. Like are you gonna talk about how to get signs?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So being able to recognize the sign is a piece of it, and then also, is it something that you're asking for, or is it something that's just coming to you?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of stray cats, like an odd amount of stray cats for sure. But I think that there's like people feeding them. Anyway, that's
Mm-hmm.
beside the point. If I was suddenly noticing that these cats were here, even though they've been here all along, if I was just suddenly picking up or, walking into or coming across them, that could be a message that's trying to come through to me without me necessarily asking for one.
Mm-hmm. Or them coming
Versus
up
if
to
I'm,
you versus like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Versus if I'm asking for, I'm thinking about this now. There was this one odd moment last summer where I was like sitting on my front porch, and we have dogs in this house. We have
Mm-hmm.
3 dogs. 2 of them are very big, and animals tend to stay away unless it's another dog that smells our dog.
Mm-hmm.
There was a cat walking down the street, and I'm sitting on the front porch, and the cat comes right up onto the porch, right up to me, starts to like caress its body against me. And I'm like super allergic. And I didn't know this cat. So I'm like, hands up, like, okay,
Yeah.
kitty,
Nice to
everything's
meet
good.
you.
Yep. I don't want my dogs to eat you. So can you go? And it just hung out for a while. And then it started like meowing at me when I wouldn't touch it. And I was like, okay, you don't need to yell at me. Thank you. And I'm not saying that that was like a synchronicity, but if something like that were to happen repeatedly, then
Mm-hmm.
I might think twice about, hey, what's going on here?
Especially if it was a different cat each time.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be so weird. Like, you'd have to really look that one up.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
why does a cat keep coming to me? Yeah.
So what you want to do is find, like I mentioned before, the author was talking about something of like a high refresh rate. You want to find something that's not going to be super common. If I'm looking for, um, let's say that the number to my house is 12. It's not, but let's say that it is.
Mhm.
And I'm looking for the number 12. Well, every time I come home, I'm going to see the number 12. So
Mhm.
that doesn't make sense. But if I'm looking for a message, then I want to find a way of receiving that message that's going to give me a high refresh rate or something that isn't going to be as common.
Mhm.
That is me asking for messages specifically. And in that, I can also take the next step. Okay, if I'm asking for a message, I need to learn what it means that I might be receiving. Is it angel numbers that I'm looking for? Is it angel numbers that I'm seeing? If I haven't asked for something specific, what is the meaning of that thing?
Mhm.
What is the meaning of that number? What is the meaning of that animal? What is the meaning of that whatever? Uh, and then I can be very specific about the question that I'm asking. I want you to, you know, the woolly mammoth. I I was typing out my notes for this and I typed ask questions and look for the answer. It can be by either already meaningful messages or asking something very specific. And then I typed example. If you are with me, show me a woolly mammoth. I typed that out on Friday night, and on Saturday morning, I went to go get my nails done, and I'm at this nail salon that I've never been to before. And on the TV, they have the news, and on the news, they are talking about woolly mammoths. And I almost had a heart attack. I was like, oh.
You're like, I didn't really mean that, but thank you.
Yeah. That for me is a huge synchronicity.
Yeah.
When typing this out, I was definitely looking for something like an example of something that would be very obscure, that wouldn't be super common. And I never see or hear about woolly mammoths, not in TV shows, not online, not in social media, not in the news, not in my personal life, anywhere.
Mhm.
So when I wrote this message, I was trying to be very specific, but also be very obscure. And Spirit was like, hey, here you go. You wanted it, you got it.
You wrote it down, so here you go.
Yep. Yep. So,
I know you called me and I was like,
yeah.
I was just laughing so hard. I was like, oh my God, that's insane.
Yeah. And then, of course, I'm like at this nail salon and I'm with my mom, but I don't talk to her about this stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm like, I can't talk to anybody about it. And I'm just like, eyes open, bug wide open, like, oh my goodness, I am getting this message. I hear you, I see you, and I can't tell anybody about it. So,
You're like, dang it.
yep, I had to wait till I got home. And anyway, these are ways of like asking for messages. I think if you can, the more specific you can be, the more that you, the more likely you are to understand the message that you're getting.
Mhm.
If I am looking for reassurance, if I am looking for connection, if I'm looking for love, if I'm looking for whatever, I want to be specific with what I'm asking.
Mhm.
I want to see this sign and this is what it means to me. And then just put it out there. Let it be. You
Mhm.
don't have to go searching for that. Please don't, because then, that can lead to a whole nother thing. But
Right.
you just want to put your message out there, ask for what you're looking for, be specific, and go about your life. And it will come to you. You will see it. And I have done this repeatedly. Um, I don't know, at some point last year, I was questioning whether or not I was having this connection with spirit. And I started asking for specific emojis to come across my phone. I started asking for specific visuals to see. I started asking, and it was like, it got to the point where I was like asking for a new sign every month. And I'm like, okay, all
And each
right.
time they're like, here, you're like,
Yeah.
no, that's not true. Here, no.
Mm-hmm.
That was coincidence. Here,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And it's like, so for just a little anecdote. For example, I at one point had asked to see the a baseball bat emoji on my phone, and I just said I said out loud bat emoji. In my head, I was thinking baseball bat emoji,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, that's super specific, and I don't like baseball, and I don't really talk to people about baseball, so there's no reason for that to come across.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I started talking to someone, and they started talking about, they said something like off the bat. And I was like, that's not a phrase that I hear often. Is
Mm-hmm.
that or is that not? And I was like, you know
Right.
what? Even though I didn't say baseball bat emoji out loud, I did say bat emoji, and that wasn't an emoji, that was a conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll put
Mm-hmm.
that down. And then later I received the emoji, and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Like,
you were
okay.
telling me, and I wasn't listening. So,
It's like that joke. Have you ever heard that joke that was like, there's a guy standing on top of his roof in a flood and he's asking God to save him. And then like I don't know, somebody in a, like the police come by in a boat and they're like, here, come with us. Like, no, 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 I'm waiting for God to save me. And
mm-hmm.
then, like that happens three more times. Like, no, 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 I'm waiting for God to save me. And then he doesn't get saved and he ends up in heaven. And he's like, why didn't you save me? I was asking for help. And God was like, I sent you three boats.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. Like, oh.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you're, that also kind of highlights, like, right, if you're looking for something super, super, super specific, you have to understand that maybe the universe is going to send it to you in a slightly different way. Um, and I hear this often, right? Like the universe, spirit, source, our spirit guides, they don't necessarily speak the same exact language as us, which is why we
Hmm.
get messages this way.
Hmm.
So being open to receiving these messages in different ways is important, but you want to be tuned in.
Hmm.
You want to know what you're looking for, you want to know what it means and what it means to you, and be able to then take that message and do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about placebo effect all the time, and I think this is one of those times that it's easy to have a placebo effect,
Yeah.
which can be good and bad. Like, I feel like some people, probably myself included at some points, are just like really looking for something and really
Mm-hmm.
looking for validation, and
Mm-hmm.
they're looking for it so hard that everything becomes a sign. And so I think you have to be kind of careful of that, and being not like super suspicious of something, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, kind of look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does this make sense that it would be? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's important for us to be able to like have that what's the word that I hear often? Discernment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be able to look at something and realize, is this what I'm looking for? Is this meant for me? Is this whatever message I need to receive right now? Um and just a little bit of that skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, what if it's not? What does that mean? Where does
Yep.
that leave me? What does that mean for the people around me? Or, you know, is this having big impacts, or is this something that's a little bit more um, localized,
Mm-hmm.
really? So learning to communicate with your spirit guides this way. What I hear people say often is like, if you're receiving a message and you can't interpret it for some reason, if you're not understanding the synchronicities, if you don't know the meaning behind it, if you don't have some sort of connection to it to give a meaning to it, then maybe it is necessary for you to ask for that to be communicated differently. Give it to me in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can understand. Can you send that message to me again? What does this mean?
Well, that's a good idea.
So being
I
able
hadn't
to
thought of
kind of,
that.
yeah. For me, I like the idea of that because it gives you a chance to have a conversation. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
just asking for and receiving, but I am also communicating. And then the other side of this is being able to look at different types of things. So, not just numbers, animals, shapes, whatever, but maybe it's cards, which we're going to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's reading tea leaves. Maybe it's an egg cleansing. Maybe it's interpreting other things that you can do to be able to communicate.
Isn't that called divination?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those are, I mean, divination is a communication.
Mm-hmm.
I might be asking for a sign. I might be asking for an answer. I might be looking into something specific, but I'm communicating.
I feel like you're good at divination.
Thank you.
You're like,
I don't know that I fully agree with that, but it is something I'm working on. So,
well, it's a start.
yeah.
You got to start somewhere. I think you're
Yes.
good at it. So there you go. Now you get to have to work on it because I said so.
Thanks for the push. I did want to mention really quickly before I move into the cards thing, if anybody looks at the article that we're attaching to this, in the article he mentions that synchronicities only come from the light, referring to like your highest soul intent. And while I appreciate that, I don't 100% agree.
Mhm.
And not that we're like getting messages that are to be deceiving or, not coming from the light. The part of that doesn't sit well with me is that we are growing, we are learning. All of us on this earth are growing towards whatever, our
Mhm.
highest self, our highest good. But for me, I'm not there yet. I know that there's still pieces that I'm like, that I struggle with sometimes, where I have those thoughts that are not so great. And I have to, like, okay, wait a minute, take a step back. There's just this idea of synchronicities only coming from the light that for me stands out as like good versus evil. And I just don't necessarily agree. We have to have this balance in everything that we do, right? When
Mhm.
we talk about the winter solstice and how everything has to die in order for it to come back to life,
Right.
that's not necessarily a good versus evil thing. And internally, we have these struggles sometimes where it's like, hey, maybe that's not the best choice, the best conversation, the best choice of words or decision. But that doesn't mean that there's like an evil battle going on, but it shouldn't be completely discounted either. Sometimes I have to have that struggle in order to not get stuck in toxic positivity.
Right. But I think I do disagree with you.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're getting these signs, you're reaching out. Well, I guess it depends. I mean, if you're not specifically saying who you're reaching out to,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you run the risk of maybe not having it come from the light, quote unquote. I guess it depends on who you think it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
who you're reaching out to.
Yeah.
I feel like, so we're saying these are coming from like source or coming from like your spirit guides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those spirit guides are there to take you forward
Mm-hmm.
and to guide you and to protect you and teach you. And spirit guides are typically from the light.
Mm.
They're ascended we're going to talk about this in a different episode, but they're they are from the highest good. They are the highest good.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point of kind of working on yourself and asking for these kind of synchronicities is to get to your highest self.
Mm-hmm.
And some people could even argue that these messages are coming from your highest self
Mm-hmm.
that you may not even be connected to yet, but
Yeah.
it's out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it does come from like, can you get like false messages because maybe something does want you to follow them?
Yeah.
Quite possibly. I guess the other question too is, what questions are you asking? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not asking the right questions, then you're not going to get the right answers, I guess. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Um, I mean, I wasn't thinking that. I think that can be part of it, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that. What I was thinking is what I was thinking is that I know that people don't always follow the same ideas, the same practices, the same ideologies. And while it can be of my highest self, that doesn't inherently mean good in that like positive, loving, light way. For example, and I don't know much about this because this is not what I practice, but I know that there are people who practice like working with certain deities, like Lilith or Hecate.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't know much about them, but from my understanding, that is more of like a protective deity. And so the things that they may be asking for are not necessarily like, hey, let's all love each other. It may be like, that person wronged me and I need to know how to get back at them. And that is the most protective. That is my highest good, but it's not necessarily good, you know,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the good
I see
versus
what you're
evil sense.
saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, yeah, I think it comes down to who you're asking,
Mm-hmm.
what you're asking. Yeah.
So, from that perspective of like, is it to further you? Is it coming from your highest self? Yes, I agree. But is it always from the light? And I put that in quotations. Not
Mhm.
necessarily.
I think it also depends on how you're interpreting light as well.
Yeah.
Um, I think we could go down a huge rabbit hole about that, but like I feel like, yeah, again, who you're asking.
Yeah.
You know, are they is it, yeah, is it the protection? Is it leading you forward? Is it
Mm-hmm.
growing your intuition? Is it bringing you to your highest self? Like what is the outcome? Who are you asking and what's your goal?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also, I'm like really wrapping this around in my head. Like you said, like Lilith and the Hecate. I think that's, would you say that's different than asking for a sign, or do you, or does it matter? Like it doesn't matter what you're asking.
I think when it
Are you
comes to
knowing what I'm trying to say?
synchronicities, it's not. I don't think it's different. Like you can ask for a sign. It doesn't matter who you're asking for a sign. If you're receiving that sign, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, you're receiving that sign. So, yeah, and I don't like I said, I don't know enough about it, but I also don't necessarily think that they're like bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can be a genuinely good person, you can be authentic, which is I think super important. Um, but you can also be very protective and protected,
Mm-hmm.
and so what you're receiving may look different or what you're asking for may look different. So I just think the terminology
Mm-hmm.
can be a little inaccurate depending on what you're referring to,
Little misleading.
or a little off-putting if you're.
Well, the other thing too is if you look at it, let's say that's that's the truth. It only comes from the light.
Mm-hmm.
If you are someone who's looking to right a wrong
Mm-hmm.
on somebody, like revenge almost, you're looking for a way to protect yourself that might be in a negative way,
Mm-hmm.
maybe those aren't actually signs and you're reading into them
Mm.
because it's not necessarily for your highest good. Because is revenge really ever for your highest good?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. Again, this is probably, we're going to get into like a theological and
Yeah,
philosophical
yeah.
debate, but like you could turn that kind of on its head, being like, but that's going to lead you down a more negative path. If you ask for negative things are going to bring
Mm-hmm.
you to a more negative path, which isn't towards your highest good.
Yeah.
It might not be what you think is your highest good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing because I've been interested in like learning more about that, and not necessarily for me. I don't think I have any interest in going down that path, but learning more about it because I've heard a lot of conversations about how, you know, people who engage with those sites, those practices, don't believe in some of these things. They don't believe in like love and light or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody can believe in whatever they want, but so it if it has no impact on them in that way, then then this entire thing is like, this entire conversation doesn't really matter. But that doesn't mean they're not getting synchronicities. That doesn't mean they don't see them. That doesn't mean they don't get messages in that way. It could be the exact same idea of, yeah, I'm looking for synchronicities. I'm looking for messages. I'm asking for this
Mm-hmm.
sign and I'm receiving it, and I'm receiving it in the same way. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just not ascribing the same meaning or weight to it that you would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's like a huge philosophical
Yeah.
like debate as to like, and also kind of what you believe. Like, do you
Yeah.
believe that there's deities out there that are not good? Do you believe in evil? Do you believe in, you know, that there's better, that there's worse?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And I guess in my mind there are
Mm-hmm.
good and evil, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak,
Mm-hmm.
or better or worse. So, and that, and I've said before is like I've always worried about calling in the wrong type of
Yeah.
like the wrong kind of spirits,
Yeah.
because I do believe that there are bad ones out there. So I guess it would make sense to make sure you're very specific about who you're asking
Yeah.
and what you're asking,
Yeah.
because you don't want to get, you know, Bob Bob Satan out there telling you the
Yeah.
wrong things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's interesting. That was an
Yeah.
interesting.
It was just something that was like coming to me because I was like, I maybe this is the therapist in me.
Mhm.
Um, I I don't like to put like my beliefs on anybody else. Um, but I also don't like to just dismiss.
Mhm.
Just because that's not what I believe doesn't mean that it's not true. And the biggest way that I've done this throughout my life, and this has nothing to do with being a therapist and everything to do with my upbringing, we've talked about plenty of times how my family is very religious and I
Mhm.
don't believe the things that they believe,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that I don't believe that it's not true for them.
Mhm.
They believe it, they go through it 100%, it's real for them.
Mhm.
I would never question that. It's not real for me,
Mhm.
which is, it's such a strange thing to say because I don't, how can I believe that it's real but not for everyone?
I
Which is
think
a whole nother
yeah,
episode, I
I think yeah. I think we have to kind of like I
think.
want to think about this one because I just had a
Yeah.
whole ton of thoughts on that. Um yeah, we'll definitely have to come back to that because I have a lot of thoughts. Okay.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing for me that's coming up is like in all of this is, even though there can be these stark differences, there's still this synchronicity. There's still that same thought process, no matter what your beliefs are, of like, oh yeah, I'm getting this sign, I'm seeing this message.
Mhm.
And so looking for it, asking for it, being open to it can help you to, connect more with whatever your beliefs are.
Yeah, I'm writing this down so I remember.
Yeah. um and then the other one that I wanted to kind of cover today was like cards and how we can use cards for asking for and receiving messages. So
Right.
cards specifically as a form of divination for communication. So what I've found is that cards can be, and they can be picked by the person who's using them, they can be gifted to somebody, they can be acquired in whatever way you find appropriate, but the person who's using them has to have some sort of connection
Mhm.
to the cards. Um, so, generally, using whatever your belief system is, whatever rituals you find appropriate, you become acquainted with the deck. Personally, when I get a new deck, I spend time looking at each of the cards, trying to figure out what that card might be meaning, without having any sort of question in mind,
Mhm.
shuffling the deck and just kind of like trying to connect my energy with the energy of the cards,
Mhm.
which is, I think, kind of weird to say out loud, but
Well, it's like goes back to the same with the crystals. Like you do the same with the crystals.
yes.
Like kind of getting to know each other.
Yeah. Carrying that crystal around and just getting those frequencies connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, shuffling them, looking at them, sometimes like flipping them over randomly and like, just trying to figure out different types of layouts that you might want to use with the cards. Um, Cleansing them first and foremost before anything else, because who knows how many other people have
Mm-hmm.
picked up this deck or, played with it or anything like that. And then something that I do, and I think other people do this, I'm sure other people do this, I just don't hear much about it, but kind of giving that deck a specific mission.
Mm. Okay.
I'm going to try to explain this because I'm not really sure how to, but so I have a deck that I use on almost a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
and that deck for me, I is my go-to for like what do I need to know today? What do I need to know in the very near future? What do I need to know about my personal life, the people in my life, and how they impact me? Um, so it's very specific versus if I'm using a deck for, we've started that, our Saturday card pull
Mm-hmm.
on social media. If I'm going to use a deck for everybody, or for the general public, or for giving general messages,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel comfortable doing that with my personal deck.
I could see that. That makes sense.
I tried and I was like, I don't like that. And
This is
I think
mine.
I
Please don't look at this.
yeah. Yeah. I think I had told you this, that and maybe I said it on the podcast, but like the first time we did it, I had used all of my decks. I have 3 of them. I used all 3 of them to um, give this message, and all 3 of them gave the same message. But
Mm-hmm.
my personal deck, I was like, that's me. That's not something that I'm sharing with everybody. So
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely can see that. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but I could see it.
yeah. So that's just something to think about when you're picking a deck, is what is the purpose of this deck? Is this going to be for you? Is it going to be for a specific audience? Is it going to be for a specific outcome? Um, so, but there's lots of different types of cards that you could use.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go back into history a little bit. The first type of card used for any sort of divination were regular playing cards.
Okay.
Your standard deck of cards that you can get anywhere. They were used in the 1300s in Europe, initially playing games,
Mm-hmm.
but then turning into divination in the like 1400s. So meanings were assigned to each suit: hearts, spades, diamonds, clubs. What
Yep.
else is on a
Clubs.
deck of cards?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Clubs,
um,
diamonds.
yes. So meanings were assigned to each suit, and then numbers were assigned a specific meaning. So if you got a 7, the 7 always had its meaning, and then the suit would tell you that meaning correlated to that aspect of life or anything like that. So that would allow people to read them, and you just had to like memorize what the meanings were.
Mm-hmm.
People started getting a little bit more individual with what those meanings were for them specifically, as opposed to like in general, as time went on. But playing cards were used initially, and then tarot cards were developed. And initially, tarot cards were used as playing cards as well, like not
Oh, okay.
immediately used for divination off the bat. So
Interesting.
yeah. But as time went on, they started to be used for divination, and that was a little bit more complex because there's different types of cards. It's not just the suits, although tarot does have suits.
Mm-hmm.
But tarot also has the major arcana, which has its own story, from the Fool to the World, I think is the last one. And it goes through this story of like of development. You
Okay.
start here, you start not knowing anything, and then you start learning, and trial and tribulation, and all the way to completion, coming all the way around. And then you have the minor arcana, which have the suits and each have their own meaning for numbers and suits and all of that stuff.
Yeah, those like the pentacles, the swords, the whatever
Mm-hmm.
else there is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tarot is not something that I am super well versed in. I tried to get more information, to learn more, to practice, and it just didn't sit right with me. And not like it was wrong or anything like that, but I just couldn't get the hang of it.
Yeah, I'm more of an oracle card.
Yeah.
I get a lot more information and more clearer messages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. But tarot came after playing cards. There's a lot of documentation of it being used as divination around the 18th century, the 1700s. And then the most well known deck, the Rider Waite Smith deck, was developed in 1909. And that refers to not just the like person who created the deck or the people who created the deck, but the artwork on the deck itself. It is the most well known of all of tarot.
Hmm.
Everybody can like pick decks based on artwork, and the artwork can speak to you, and so you may
Mm-hmm.
find that maybe that's just not the artwork that works well. The reason why the artwork is important is because you look at that and that can
Mm-hmm.
give you the information. What am I seeing on this card? What is it telling me? Colors, things that are popping out. What's the story that it's giving me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a lot of structure to tarot, and like I said, connecting with the visuals on the card is what gives you that the interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Around the same time, but slightly later than tarot, was Lenormand cards. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that was. It's said that that was created by a woman, Marie Anne Lenormand, who was a famous fortune teller in the 18th century, and she created this deck of cards and kind of took tarot and then made it more specific for her
Mm.
so that she could give messages and tell fortunes.
Yeah.
The very early versions of these types of cards were very different and independent from tarot.
Mm.
But today you can see that there's some sort of combination of both tarot and Lenormand cards
Hmm.
pulled in together.
I never heard of those.
Yeah. There is structure to using those types of cards, not always super intense structure, and there can be a little bit more freedom in how you interpret them.
Okay.
And then oracle and angel cards. So, as you just mentioned, oracle cards. That those are kind of where my ball game is right now, where
Mm-hmm.
I kind of sit with, and I have um, the deck that I use on a daily basis. I have another deck that is that I haven't used in a while, but I'll go to every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those have a lot more flexibility. Again, the artwork has a lot to do with it. You want to be able to read into what you're seeing, what's the
Mm-hmm.
message telling you based on the question that you're asking. Is there anything that sticks out? Is there any sort of story that you can see there? And there's not a lot of rigidity in how you interpret them.
Yeah, I found mine. I was down in Mystic at like
Mm-hmm.
some shop in Mystic,
Yeah.
and the interesting thing is I kept seeing both. I went into the shop and I kept seeing both owls, which is very important to me, and then Archangel Michael kept
Mm-hmm.
coming up. And I was like going through the whole store and like kept like seeing these different things and different things. And I ended up at the card section
Mm-hmm.
and the Saint Michael card deck was there, which is an oracle card. So Saint Michael was there, and then above it was an owl card. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. I'll take that one. So I took the Saint Michael one, which has
Yeah.
actually been really good for me. So,
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
That initial like draw and connection, I think makes a huge difference
mm-hmm,
in
yep,
in the role that the cards can play for you.
Mm-hmm.
So once you know like the general meaning of the cards, you can begin to interact with the deck and ask questions. You can use different types of spreads, um, lay out the cards in whatever particular way that you're going to read them. So you might do past, present, future, so left to right. You might do top to bottom. You might do a 10 card spread or whatever. You can make up your own spreads. You can use spreads that are suggested.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these card decks will come with a little booklet that might give you some ideas on spreads and some information about the meanings of the cards.
Mm-hmm.
What I have found is initially learning the cards, I would turn to the book often and, okay, this means this. But as time has gone on, I don't use it so much. I use it more in a way of like confirming what I've already
Mm-hmm.
decided or what I've already interpreted, or expanding upon what I've interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to journal on them, being able to process what the meaning is, being able to look for what it might be telling me, so that I can be more intentional and present in my day to day.
Yeah, I definitely use the booklet. I don't do any of the interpretation of the card, but
Yeah.
I don't do it enough either. Like I said, you're better at divination than me, so.
That's something I'm going to continue to practice. But yeah, I mean, I think I would like to get um, a few more decks to be able to practice with and play with and use for
Mm-hmm.
different settings or different things.
Yeah, I think you
But
should.
being able to ask for, whatever message you're trying to get an answer to, these are great ways of starting that process. Again, it's not something that needs to have, unless you're doing something like tarot, which is very specific.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily need to have a lot of knowledge, understanding, research, study.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of just lean in.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I did. I had never used tarot before. I'd never used an oracle card. I didn't even know what that was. And started using it, and just like, again, I used the book,
Yeah.
and I think it comes down to like setting that intention and like kind of sitting, like just keeping that question in your mind as you're shuffling and just seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will often do my own, whole ritual with how I start and everything, but I'll often um, verbalize the question out loud, do my shuffling. I have a very specific way of doing that, and then ask the question one more time before I flip over the card. If
Mm-hmm.
for some people they won't like read cards upside down because that has a different meaning, or they don't want to read them that way, or sometimes if I'm shuffling, a card might slip out. The way that I shuffle, that doesn't really happen often.
Mm-hmm.
And because it doesn't happen often, when it does happen, I'm usually like,
Mm.
that's the card I'm supposed to see.
That's it.
Yeah. Um, some people shuffle and cards flip out frequently. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's up to the person who's doing it to decide whether or not that's something that they want to read or not.
Mm-hmm.
So the flexibility is nice in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are just a couple different ways of getting some messages and figuring out, how you start to communicate with spirit.
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's very much a give and take
Mm-hmm.
in intuitive work. Um, because we're getting information from source,
Yeah.
and that's how we're getting, at least this is how my interpretation of it is that we get these gifts from source. So like we have to kind of go back and forth and
Mm-hmm.
use that communication tools, and how you do that is individual to the person, but also there's some of these things that kind of are across the board, like the
Mm-hmm.
synchronicities and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. There can be a lot more of um a lot more of the work that goes into communicating. And if you're doing something like reading tea leaves, if you're doing something like using runes, if you're doing something like, I mean, I've seen people use bones
The
and oh,
pendulum.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pendulums. And if you're doing anything like that, for me, I feel like I would need to have a much stronger connection to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd need to continue to develop that
Yeah.
to be comfortable using something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but these ways are a lot easier to just start with.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So maybe people can get started, see if there's any sort of question that you want to ask, and ask to see some synchronicities, ask for some answer, or go pick up a
Yeah.
deck of playing cards, or a deck of oracle cards or tarot cards, and start to communicate a little bit.
Yeah. To see what happens.
Let us know.
All right. Like us, follow us, comment, send us messages where you listen to us. Social media is actually, we changed the name on Instagram is at spiritual underscore mamas underscore podcast
Yes.
on Instagram, and then just spiritual mamas podcast on Facebook. And yeah, go from there.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.